What is up, guys, and welcome to Developer Habits, a YouTube channel for software engineers interested in growth mindset, developer lifestyle, and technical tutorials. My name is Ketmar. I'm a full stack engineer from Estonia. Today's video is a bit special because we have a guest visitor called Adrian, who's a fellow YouTuber, designer, and developer. We're going to talk about topics like university and the necessity of it, changing your career and jumping into the world of web development, how to approach learning in order to become a good developer, and finally, what are the qualities and habits of a good software engineer. So without any further ado, let's jump into the interview.
So maybe you can just tell about yourself, like what's your background and what you've been up to.
Yeah. I've got a bit of a mixed background. My parents are actually Polish, so people have picked up on the fact that I'm Polish every now and then. But I was born here, so what that means was that when I was going to school and learning and everything, I didn't really get to understand English. I was taught Polish at home, so I felt a little bit outside between like all the kids and the friends. I had a difficult time making friends, so a lot of the times my parents, my mom was in electronics, and what she'd do is just sit me down in front of a computer while she was working. So I learned to work on the computer really early on and sort of figure things out myself because I was quite independent.
How old were
And
you?
from there, that was since I was 3 or 4 years old. As soon as I started going to school, it's essentially didn't really mesh well with many of the kids, unfortunately, just because I couldn't talk to them. I still hadn't even learned proper English. I was the first one in my family to learn proper English. So it almost feels like it's my second language. Programming is my first language in a lot of senses. That's how it feels. And when I was going to school, it was still like a good 20 years ago or so. And back then, there was only 1 or 2 computers in the whole school, only 1 or 2 computers. And I was sitting at that computer every single day, just trying to figure things out. I think back then we had like websites which would take, I don't know, 4 minutes to load, and pictures would take forever to load. But I was already jumping in there and trying to figure out how those things worked. And I think that's when early on I figured out that this is sort of what I like to do. So I was really inspired to jump into all the IT classes when I was going through the schooling system. The problem was when I was going into university, I didn't really know what I wanted to do in terms of which area in computing. So I sort of did computer science, and I did a little bit of everything there. And a lot of the people I talked to just said, go into IT. IT's where all the jobs are at. And I
Just to
decided,
IT.
all right, well,
No, like
sorry?
just to IT, no specific.
No, oh, actually, they did say that security was really important. So I did a majors in computer security, forensics, and stuff like that. But what I found out was that there's actually not that many jobs in computer security. It's a very small niche, and unless you're getting work with like a top tier security company or the police, there's not many jobs out there. So that's why I sort of pivoted to just doing basic IT as the secondary thing there. And there's heaps of jobs in that, but unfortunately, if anyone's in IT, they know it's grueling work. It's really tough because you're dealing with people who are frustrated. You're dealing with people with problems every single day. And while you have to solve those problems, you don't normally get any thank yous or anything like that. It's just jumping into the next problem with the next person who's frustrated. And this was something I didn't enjoy for a long time.
So does it mean that by IT you mean working with hardware?
Hardware, yeah, like CPUs, RAM, fixing people's emails, all that stuff that people do where, you just need to fix computers, really. So I knew that I wasn't enjoying that, and that's when I started learning programming more in depth. I did more graphics because I just enjoyed doing graphics in Photoshop and stuff, and I started learning my HTML, my CSS, and that's sort of where I realized that maybe I want to swap careers one day. It's scary when you start working in a career and you've worked in there for now a few years. You've got a degree in that career. Like a web degree is really different than a computer science degree. different things you're learning. And it felt like I couldn't make that jump. Like I didn't have any experience behind me. I didn't have any projects or anything. And I had worked so long in IT, and I had built up a bit of, a level there and security in terms of salary. It's just a scary thing. So I just ended up doing little passion projects as in development and websites, just because I thought this is what I enjoy. I treated it more like a hobby, I suppose, like someone who might paint when they get home and just draw something, or draw some comics. That's sort of how I took development, as a hobby, and that sort of led me to work on little different projects and ideas and build up my skill set, just because I was playing around with it and tinkering with it every single day. And I suppose that's how I got into development.
But regarding university, when you studied IT, did you also like get to learn the basics of programming, for example, or was it something?
So we never did any real courses on programming. We had a Java course, but at that stage I didn't really know Java, and a lot of the questions and exams that were in there, I could literally copy paste answers in from the internet. So I didn't actually learn anything. And Java didn't really sit well with me. I personally like JavaScript, but somehow Java itself never worked for me, so I suppose I didn't learn it that well. And in that sense, the rest of the courses were very strange. They were like how hexadecimal works in RAM, and maybe how different bits get transferred wirelessly when you're authenticating. It wasn't anything interesting. It was just really low-level stuff that I learned, and most of it I didn't really need to use in the real world. It's not useful stuff, unfortunately.
It's just the background information you get, right? Like nice to have information.
So yeah, it was one of those things that if I could go back and do it again, I wouldn't go to university. I would just start learning things myself online by, there's so many resources out there, and learning to do it yourself is so much more inspiring because you are a lot more dedicated when you do it that way. When you're going through uni, it's almost like a chore because you're forcing yourself to go through the studies that other people want you to do. There's set agendas and requirements, and when you're doing it that way, it's sort of like tutorial hell, as people say. You're doing tutorials over and over, but you're not learning anything. It's only until you start doing things yourself, like your own project, your own hobby, in development or design, that you start to learn the most. And that's what I figured out, quite late in the game.
But regarding university, I agree with you here, because like I also learned the ins and outs of how computers work, basic programming, but it's you who has to start working and do projects, right, in order to actually learn something. But
yeah, exactly.
For example, when you went to the university, do you still hang out with people that you met, or do some of them?
I did for a while. Like while I was there, we would regularly do catch-ups. We would plan out how we do projects. We would do other events outside of university. And then a lot of them actually moved into completely different careers. Like the best friend that I had at university, who did computer science with me, we did all the computer security things. He now runs a pharmacy selling, all sorts of stuff, but it's completely different. It's hasn't had any relevancy. It's more, I suppose you can build up a skill set in university if you're going to plan to stay in the university system. But otherwise, university is mainly very good for networking. So I did make a lot of friends in there. Unfortunately, they all went to other countries and other completely different careers that were unrelated to web. So I didn't really work with them that much. But if I could go back, I would definitely try to talk to more people while I was at university, because I think that's really important. That's where you can build up that network. When I left and went into IT and worked there for a while, and then I wanted to swap to web, I had to rebuild that network from scratch. And that meant going to lots and lots of events and talking to lots and lots of people. But I would have been a lot better off if I had just done that earlier on at uni, when all the people were essentially already there.
Yeah, it's also something I like take away from the uni. Not the skills that I acquired, because most of them I learned myself, but the network that I have. And
Yeah.
in my case, many people still are in IT, which is really nice. So you have people to talk to. But I agree. Like, especially nowadays, you have so many different resources out there. Maybe even too many. So it's hard to like qualify which are good and which are bad. But still, you, at least in web development, you have the resources to learn yourself.
Yeah, definitely. So that's how I did it anyway. I ended up learning it all myself. And I think that's one of the best ways to do anything. The people that truly learn something very well are the people learning it themselves inside and out, because they enjoy it, they're passionate about it. And I think that's the difference as well, that if you really enjoy something, you'll want to work on it on your own time. You'll want to learn about it yourself. And then in that kind of level, university and TAFE and all those sorts of things don't have anything that you yourself can't figure out if you just go into learning it, reading it online, getting your own books and researching it, and essentially, yeah, self-learning, I suppose.
But let's move away from the topic of uni and go back to your career, and especially the change of career. So,
Okay.
for how long did you work in IT, and when did you start to feel that maybe that's not something I want to do?
So, I already could tell at university that I didn't really enjoy uni. So what I actually did was I started working full time while going full time to university. I found a job through a friend of mine, and it was at a school. So I worked in the schooling system doing IT support for students and teachers and whatnot. And that was pretty relaxing. And it's a good place to build up a network because a lot of people there are talking and stuff like that. And all the schools collaborate between themselves. So as soon as that small contract finished, I think it was only for a few months during the school break, then I essentially got another job at another school. And that worked well as well. I got a lot of stuff done there and they were pretty happy with me. So when I was about to finish up uni, then I was already recommended for a full-time position at a third school. So that already started up my first year or two of working in the schooling system in IT. I learned quite a lot there, but it's very relaxing work. Like, you can easily sit back and work there for the rest of your life without any worries. It felt like it wasn't pushing me forward, whether it was in IT or whatever I wanted to do. It just felt like I'm one of those people that likes to keep learning, likes to keep improving and getting better. So what I did was I made a decision to essentially quit the IT schooling system and move into consulting, where you get to work with big companies, you work on different projects. And I was hoping that would sort of increase my my skills. I would get better at IT and move up in position.
So the main reason
And that's what I did. Yeah,
the main reason for moving away from schools was that you wanted new challenges.
exactly. Because I still wasn't really happy doing IT, and I thought if I have bigger challenges, then maybe I'll be happier. And so I sort of first swapped within the same career to a different type of position in that career. And I found I still wasn't happy. If anything, it was worse. I felt like I had more pressure, more responsibility, and I didn't really enjoy the consulting space. So what I did was, after that, I sort of moved to a quasi-government, semi-business membership company. And that was similar to the schooling system. It was very laid back and relaxing, and I just chilled there for about 5 or 6 years. And I just thought, I'll just enjoy my life, go on some holidays, and just assume that I'm not going to enjoy working. But it wasn't until I got married and I had a son that I thought, these guys can tell I'm not really happy with my work. And I can't keep working so hard in a job I don't enjoy. I want to be able to tell to my kid that I love my job and for him to look up to me. And I couldn't do that. So it was a really tough decision. But at that stage, I decided that I just wanted to quit and start fresh. And that's where I made that decision to swap careers to web, because I had always been thinking about doing web. I had played around with it for ages, just learning how to do little passion projects and hobby ideas and whatnot. But it wasn't until I essentially had my kid that I thought, enough is enough. I want to do what I love rather than just making $1. So I did have to take a huge pay cut to do that. But being happy doing the work you want to do in development and design is so much more worth it than any dollar figure at the end of the day, I think.
So basically, what I read from that is that you needed this final push, and being a role model for your child was that push.
I think so. I don't think I would have done it otherwise, because I was just happy essentially doing just assuming that I'm not going to be happy with my job. I was just, I don't know what the word is for that. Maybe it's sort of like, let me think. Sort of where you might just accept your fate. You accept that you'll never be happy working at your job, and you just do it for the weekends. You work and work until you have the weekend, then you enjoy some time, and then you get back to work. And then as soon as you're doing your job, and in my case, it was IT and dealing with difficult people and whatnot, I was just looking forward to the end of the day where I could go home and then work on a small website idea I might have had or something like that, So I sort of just gave up, I suppose. And yeah, it wasn't until I got married and had my son that I thought, no, I can't give up. I have to make a decision to do something better for my life. And that's where I sort of made that decision.
So basically, going to web development was also a chance for you to redefine what work means to you, right? That it doesn't it doesn't have to be something you just tolerate and wait for the weekend. It's something you should and can enjoy.
Yeah, a lot of my friends, they were also just doing work that they needed to. You could tell that sometimes they weren't happy. They were mainly doing it to get some money, and there were not that many people out there that said, do what you love and also make money from it. It was just go to work, make sure that you have a stable job, make sure you can pay for your house, make sure you can support your family. It's not about doing what you enjoy. So it was changing that mindset, which was really hard. But once you make that switch and you decide for yourself that that's what you're going to do, then you'll be able to see lots of possibilities. You're almost blind to the options if you don't think that way,
So in the end, it's about making that final decision and then finding the opportunities.
Exactly. So for me, it didn't happen straight away. I still had to look a long time. I had to tell all my friends and my family and my network and everyone I could that, I'm looking for something different. And I had to do a lot of work around that as well to prove myself. But, if you keep constant at it, like eventually through a friend of a connection of another connection, I found a new job in web development. And that's sort of how I got started in that.
Can we maybe go to web development? You had built some simple projects. You had learned HTML and CSS, for example. But let's talk about the journey of learning web development. How did it happen?
So as I was saying before, I did do a lot of IT, but when I was going home, I was working on my own little ideas and projects and stuff. And there were all sorts of things, like maybe a website design in Photoshop, or then maybe I tried to make that website with HTML and CSS. And then if I didn't know how to do something, I'd Google it up, and bit by bit, I kept doing that. I didn't really do any courses, because a lot of people like to do their tutorials and their courses to learn. But I actually never really did those. I literally was just jumping in and had no idea what these things called divs were, and just putting them in and figuring out, all right, they sort of make a block, and then playing around with CSS and figuring out, all right, display does something. It can be a block as well, or an inline block. And bit by bit, after years of hating IT and then loving doing development, you sort of figure these things out and where they go. So it probably took me a lot longer to figure all that development out. But like I had been working in IT for almost 10 years now. And during those 10 years, I was still playing around with web development all the time. So over 10 years of playing around with it, tinkering with it, I ended up figuring out that I actually do know this quite well. It was putting in that time every day to learn yourself, I suppose. And that's sort of how I learned it without doing any tutorials or anything like that. Yeah, you were saying?
Yeah, I was about to say that I really liked what you said about learning bit by bit and learning by doing, and especially like things like CSS. At work, I see many backend developers, for example, they just hate CSS, and for front-end people, like they have put in the hours to learn CSS, right? And I don't know if you agree with me, but I believe like learning CSS is something you just have to play around with it until you get more or less familiar with it.
I think it's mainly because there's so much difference between maybe CSS and HTML. They feel like, well, they are two different languages. It's sort of like learning maybe Chinese and then suddenly you're learning Japanese. And the whole language structure is different because of how it reads, how it works. And it can be scary. It can be hard to understand. But if you put in the time to learn both, then you'll understand how both of them work together. Then it's actually quite fun to be able to play around with them. You'll understand how they work and you'll be able to do anything you want with them. So I personally really like CSS these days. I understand how it works and I can sort of make it do whatever I need it to do. Of course, it's a learning journey. You have to be able to learn it to be able to finally enjoy it and talk with it, I suppose.
And to learn, I guess you agree with me, is that you can do those tutorials, you can acquire tons of theoretical knowledge, but in the end, you have to play around, you have to build your own stuff.
Well, it's the same as talking to someone in Chinese and Japanese. You're only going to learn so much if you read books or watch videos of people talking Japanese. It's not going to be until you start talking Japanese or Chinese to someone every single day that over time you'll learn the language. I think it's the same principle for programming.
Yeah, I agree. But regarding learning, time management is also an important topic. And as you said, you're a father, and being a parent while also learning something new can be quite hard, I assume. Can you maybe talk about how do you manage your time?
I have a very strict schedule. So I usually plan out my day in the mornings. I'll have a little to-do list where I block out how many hours I spend on everything. So my son usually goes to kindergarten in the mornings, so I don't see him till about 2:30, besides the morning anyway. And usually that chunk of time allows me to work during the day of all my day job stuff that I need to do. Then in the afternoon, I usually pick him up from school and I spend an hour with him between around 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock-ish. And that's where I can play, like Super Mario with him. I can play some racing cars. I usually like to spend that time. And then I let him have a nap. So then I usually work for another few hours. And my wife comes home pretty late in the day, maybe around 6 or 7 o'clock. And then we just, that's about the time my son wakes up again. So we have dinner together, we spend some time together, and my kid's back to sleep again, which is pretty quick. But then in the evening is when I start jumping on and tinkering with little projects. Maybe I'll do a video on YouTube. I'll have a look at what's happening in the industry because the industry is always changing. There's a really cool website I like to jump on, which is called Egghead.io, and they have some really cool courses on there. So I've got a subscription to that. And usually I like to do 1 or 2 of those simply because they're really short. They're only like 2 or 3 minutes sometimes to learn a quick topic. But that's sometimes as much time as you have, Unlike a lot of people, I don't really watch TV. I don't watch Netflix. I almost don't even watch YouTube half the time. I just usually work. I like to learn and work, and that's pretty much it. So when it comes to the weekend, for example, I might have like a couple of TV shows I might have wanted to watch, maybe a couple of YouTube clips, but I fast forward them. I watch them and time skip just so that I can finish them up in like half an hour. And then I'm back to work because I'm a bit of a workaholic in that sense. So I'm always trying to learn new things and do more, essentially.
I see that when you say the work or well doing something, you also connect it to like learning and challenges, I assume. So
Yeah, go on.
so as I understand, in order for you to in order to be able to work and like what you do, you must also have the challenges.
Um, for me, I suppose challenges are good. I know that a lot of people use challenges to overcome, learning and stuff like that. But for me, it's been more about actually working on little projects, things that I enjoy. I find that works a lot better for me because when I enjoy something, then I can sort of get lost in it and you don't know how long you end up spending in it. A challenge sometimes feels a little bit pressure sensitive to me. I think it might be that IT background where we used to have challenges of, oh no, the whole internet system or email system is down. You have to fix it because the company is losing money. And that challenge sort of made me feel a little bit uncomfortable. That's why I didn't really like IT. Whereas in development, I found that you don't really have that as much. You have more focus on testing, on making sure you're doing things properly. And that's something I really enjoy about it. So that in web development, like a good system is one that's been properly tested, double checked, and stuff like that. And it's almost avoiding the conflicts that you might have. Whereas IT sometimes felt a little bit like ad hoc fixing issues. That makes sense, yeah.
But regarding web development, a topic you mentioned before is that things are constantly changing, and there's always more topics to be learned, right?
Yes, yes.
What's your take on that?
I suppose it's to find the balance of what you're happy with, as well as what you enjoy. How can I explain this? In my situation, I like React. So I know that there's lots of topics on Angular. I know there's lots on Vue, and I could get lost in all the different types of frameworks. And between all of those, I found that I enjoyed React. So I focused in a little bit more on React. Then, of course, React is changing all the time as well. You've got things like functionless components now and hooks, which I hadn't learned, but I actually ended up focusing in on React Native, which was more app development. And as you focus down more and more, there's a few less things that keep changing. And you can sort of specialize in a specific area when you're doing development. And that way you don't have to be overwhelmed by all the changes. You'll have still, things like NPM and Yarn and everything changing in the background. But to a relative degree, it doesn't affect you as long as you're still just building in the one technology stack that you enjoy. I know that a lot of people like to learn all of them, and I think that's the overwhelming part because all of them will constantly be changing. And if you do try to essentially keep up with all of that, it's going to be impossible because there's just too much.
And also the question is, should you try to learn everything? Because how I believe it's when you know one programming language, for example, or one framework, let's say you know React well enough, then going to Vue isn't that hard anymore because you already know what reactivity means, you already know how components are graded and so on. But it's something I felt, especially when I started out as a developer, that, oh my God, there are so many things I have to learn. But once you start learning, then it becomes easier.
Yeah, I think it is. It is easier, and you could go about learning each one of those. But I think of it also from a practical point of view. What are you going to be working in? For me, I don't learn something unless I'm sure I'm going to be working in it. So for React Native, I knew that I had a job coming up for React Native. So that's how I sort of got started into learning React Native inside and out. Then I know that I had a job for Ionic, I think it is, which is another way to build apps. And with Ionic, I never used it before. But it wasn't until I got that job that I decided, all right, I'm going to learn Ionic and make sure that I can start building with it. I think that learning for the sake of learning is good if that's what you want to do. But if you only have so much time in the day, then it's good to be methodical around how you do that. You have to pick the things that you're going to be planning to be using, so that way you can learn those, so that you can still have your day life as well. Otherwise, you'll be learning forever, and if you don't use any of it, then it sort of didn't go anywhere really.
Yeah. And here I'd also like to point out that a tutorial hell is a thing, right? And when you when you learn something new, you should always have some kind of project, a pet project or a client, where you can utilize those skills that you are learning. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I said before that I swapped from IT to web design as part of my first job. And before then, I never even used WordPress before in my entire life. And my first job was to make a full website design that's custom and everything. And that's when I learned WordPress, when it was time to work on it, And now I've been, learning it inside and out. But before then, I probably wouldn't have looked at it simply because that's not what I was using. I was actually learning PHP and MySQL and essentially the building blocks of what WordPress is actually built on. So when it came time to learn WordPress, then it actually wasn't that hard because I already understood how PHP works, for example. So sometimes learning is good, but building that learning onto practicality is even better.
Yeah, and it's also something I did, how I learned WordPress. I got an actual client, and then you already have a really specific goal that you want to achieve, right? And so it's easier to Google things, and it's easier to kind of put the puzzle together.
Yeah, it's almost like a challenge in itself, right?
Yeah. But I'm gonna switch the topic just a bit.
All right.
You also do YouTube videos, and I'd like to ask, what's the role of learning, and what's the role of YouTube in learning to you?
Can you rephrase those questions?
Yeah, sure. When you create videos, is creating videos also a way of learning things to you?
That's a tough one. I'm not too sure how to answer that one, simply because a lot of the videos I've done so far are already on topics that I know and understand quite well. So it's just trying to pass on that knowledge that I've learned in a way that I wish was passed on to me. A lot of the tutorials I find are in two phases. Either they're too short and someone understands the topic too well, so you can't follow along with what they're doing, or the video is so long that I don't have 2 hours to spend to learn it, and it's going into little bugs they might have. It's not really learning per se, it's more just them playing around and learning, and you're trying to learn what they're trying to learn. And I found that not very useful. So I wanted to create videos which were a little bit in between, where you're teaching something in a systematic format, where you're not wasting time of you yourself learning it. You're just showing and teaching it to your audience, sort of like what Egghead does, because Egghead gave me a lot of inspirational. They did the similar thing, but theirs are even shorter. Theirs are only 2 or 3 minutes per topic. I wanted to do topics which were a little bit longer, maybe 10 minutes or so, but where you're teaching the audience something and considering their time. So you're going straight into the gist of it and teaching them from a beginner so that they can start using it straight away.
Yeah, and well, I've seen your videos. They are quite practical. In that sense, you show us something real. But what do you think about, for example, when you are just starting out and you start creating videos of your learning journey already then?
Mm-hmm. Do you mean for new people who might be thinking of doing YouTube, or just for myself in general?
Let's say for new people who are interested in starting a YouTube channel.
All right. For people starting out, I still recommend doing what you know and doing what you enjoy, and also having a look at what's out there and what you yourself wish that was there, because it's like music, like people who write books, and I assume like people who do YouTube. You're trying to create the content that you wish was out there, that you yourself would enjoy. I wouldn't look too much about fan service, because otherwise you get things like fanfic and stuff that is in the book industry, where people don't really enjoy that. They don't want to see something that all the fans want. So in YouTube, I suppose that would be not wanting to see the same YouTube video about the same framework or to-do list over and over again. You want to create something unique. You want to create something that you yourself enjoy. Like, for example, when I did a video on how to do geolocations and maps on React Native, I didn't just do a tutorial pasting down pins on a map. I had a look at an API that does bushfires, and I used that as the reference. So while I was teaching someone how to use the geolocation map system on React Native, I was actually also showing them how to map out all the bushfires in Australia with all the different types of pins pulled in from Font Awesome. So it's a little bit more interesting, a little bit more personality to it. So I think that's pretty important as well if you're planning to do stuff.
Mm-hmm. And again, I see the pattern of having a specific, some kind of goal or project.
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot more interesting than avoid to-do lists. That's my main tip there.
I'm gonna ask you a really, it's a genuine question. What would be your advice to people who are interested in changing career and jumping into the web development world?
This is something that I actually was thinking about just the other day. It's one of those things that's actually really still hard to do if you're thinking of swapping careers. So if you're planning on just doing it, and don't just do it for the sake of doing it, make a plan around it. Make a systematic approach. If you want to do that, my recommendations would be find out what it is exactly that you want to do. When you figure that out, start learning it. See if that's actually something you enjoy or not. Because you might not know. It might be just one of those things like the grass is greener on the other side. If you start doing it and working with it, you might find you don't even enjoy that. You first have to figure out if working in it, maybe playing around with your own projects, you're actually enjoying it. When you figure out you have been enjoying it, then you don't have to jump careers immediately. You can plan out approach for that as well, such as maybe you'll say, hey, I want to go part-time, and instead of working 5 days a week, I'll work 4. It's not much of a big change. And a lot of companies, especially in this situation these days, will probably be fine with that. So then with that one extra day, you could start looking at doing some real work. There's lots of sites like Fiverr and Upwork, and there's still lots of industries. Like web is still going very well in this current situation where a lot of people want to be online a lot more. I'm getting lots of requests for websites and logos and stuff like that. So there's definitely opportunity out there. And using that one day, you can start doing bits of work on there. And if you're finding that you're getting more and more, that's where you can progressively take your career in a systematic approach, where maybe now you'll be working only 3 days a week in your career, and then you'll do 2 days in web and design until you get to the point where you can fully sustain yourself and swap careers entirely. I made the mistake when I originally was working that I quit my job and then started looking for a new job straight away. It wasn't when I was switching careers at that time. But quitting a job and then trying to find a new job is really hard. People ask you, why did you quit? You have to explain you wanted a new job. And then they'll ask, why didn't you stay until you found a new job? It's the same if you want to swap careers. It's best to do that when you're finally ready and you already have work under your belt.
I haven't even thought about it, like doing it gradually. So that's an interesting point. It's not black and white. There's some gray area.
Websites and design, yeah, it's one of those fields where you can really do that. You don't have to sit in an office and work with other people every day from 9 to 5. You can do it at any time. It gives you that freedom. And some other businesses, like say construction and stuff like that, don't have that possibility.
But regarding web development, would you consider it hard as an industry to jump into?
I think it's can be scary with how people talk about coding interviews and how many different frameworks are out there,
Let me
how many different languages are out there.
I'll rephrase the question.
You go on.
What are the qualities that you should have in order to like enjoy and be successful in learning web development?
I think that'll depend on each person and why they're doing it. For me, I know that I enjoyed it because it felt like a challenge. I've done a lot of challenges in IT and stuff, and they felt like a lot of pressure. But in web development, they didn't feel like pressure. They felt like an enjoyable challenge, sort of like competing and seeing what kind of a website you can create and seeing if you can do a better job every single day. And I enjoyed that. I also like the part where it didn't matter if you were tall or short, if you had muscles or not. Like, it's not like going to the gym and lifting weights. If you put in the time, then you'll get quantified results. There's nothing holding you back. So anyone from anywhere in the world can essentially pick it up and do it, as long as they're willing to put in the time and effort.
Yeah, it's really accessible. You just need the internet and a computer.
Exactly, yeah.
But about you, what's the dream for you as a developer, as a person? Where do you go on from here?
These days, I'm really happy just working in development, doing some design, spending time with my family. I feel like I've created a balance where my work life is just about perfect now. It's also part of the reason that I started doing YouTube. It's because I felt that now that I have this really good balance, maybe I can do something extra around the things that I already like. And I find that it's going quite well. I'm pretty happy with it. And if anything, I want to do a little bit more to show you guys essentially what I've learned and what I'm doing.
This is really awesome to hear, especially that like web development.
That's good. That's good.
I'm gonna ask you one more question, and that will be the final question. Name one habit that makes you a better developer.
For me personally, it's just hard work. I think that's what's gotten me to where I am now. It's that hard work that I put in while I was in IT and I was coming home, and I wasn't just sitting back on the couch watching TV. It was hard work learning my own projects. It's when I did my career switch, it's that hard work I put in to make sure that I keep my job, that I can show that I can build WordPress, even if I hadn't known how it works, putting that hard work in to learn it and then create a job. And still to this day, doing that hard work to make sure that I keep learning the newest, things in programming and web, because that's what I enjoy. But it's still work, at the end of the day, it's still you, not essentially, I suppose, consuming social media, consuming just general stuff like that. It's more about you working on yourself, working hard to develop yourself instead. And I think over time that builds up and helps you become a better developer.
What I can take away from here is that you have to put in the hours, but you also must be consistent with it.
Yes, that's right. I've seen other people that, start from nothing. And when they put in that hard work, they grow, they develop, they get better. And you can see that, there's quantifiable results between putting in the hard work and getting results, especially in web development anyway.
Anyways,
so yeah.
I'm out of questions that I wanted to ask. So is there anything you'd like to say to, let's say, people who want to become developers?
Yeah, sure. Look, if people want to do development, then there's a ton of resources out there. One of my favorites that I've seen time and time again is the free code camp. That's really good to get you started. And that's where I would start if I was starting from the beginning. And once you learn that and you understand the fundamentals, then my second favorite is, as I mentioned before, Egghead.io. I think that has some really good resources to get you up and running and understanding concepts. And when you've gone through those two, then that's when you get to start working on your own projects, and you'll be able to pull out, different things on Google to solve your own problems. And this is the core of development. Once you learn those skill sets and those fundamentals, you'll be able to get a job anywhere, I think. If I was hiring, that's what I would be asking for and looking for people to have.
That's a good advice. And also, I'm gonna make a shout out to Florian Pop here, who has actually created videos about him doing free code camp, those tutorials. So that's
yes,
really cool.
He's one of those examples of hard work in practice.
Yeah. But anyways, man, that's it, I guess. I genuinely thank you for this conversation, and I guess we all have tons of things to take out from this chat. And
no worries. As I always say at the start and the end of my videos, thanks for watching. Hope you like and subscribe. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one.
Yeah, subscribe.